Welcome into the Royal Cougars podcast. I am Kyle Ireland, your host, and today on the podcast we are here to preview BYU's fourth game of the season. Can you believe it? We're already at game number 4. Heading into Boulder, Colorado this weekend. BYU is ranked at number 25 in the AP Top 25 poll, and they will be facing off against Coach Prime's Colorado Buffaloes. This week, BYU is going to face a team that, Aaron Roderick called a step up in competition heading into this game. BYU is, I feel like, finding its rhythm on the offensive side of things, and then on the defense, BYU's just been playing lights out football through 3 games, although they did allow a touchdown for the first time against East Carolina. But this Colorado team is a more complete team as well, and they're going to be able to bank on the fact that it seems like they knew who their quarterback is now, with Caden Salter getting a start again in back-to-back games. But Colorado, I think, is still trying to figure out who they are on defense as well, and BYU will look to take advantage of them, I think, especially in the run game with LJ Martin and then also Bear Bachmeier with his legs. But this week, I wanted to get an inside look for you on the Colorado Buffaloes, and now I'm going to be joined by Kevin Borba of Locked On Buffs podcast, who covers the team every single day. Here's my conversation with Kevin. My next guest on the Royal Cougars podcast is someone who covers the Colorado Buffaloes on the daily. It's Kevin Borba of the Locked On Network. He covers them on Locked On Buffaloes. He also writes for Athlon Sports. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think we're in store for a good game, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it's a little more competitive, I think, especially in the second half than what we saw in the Alamo Bowl last season. And I kind of want to start there with you, if you don't mind. How different is this Colorado team than last season's Buffs? Because obviously, different quarterback, losing Shedeur to the NFL, but you also, don't have guys like Horn and Travis Hunter on the outside, but you still got Coach Prime leading this program.
Yeah, I think the main difference is they have to be a more complete team, right? Last year, they kind of were allowed to rely on Shedeur, rely on Travis to play superhero at times, and now it's like, okay, we have to be more methodical on offense, right? We have to run our offense through whoever's at quarterback this week. It's going to be Caden Salter again. They did this whole quarterback experiment, ended with Caden Salter, started with him. But yeah, I think the biggest change in offense is they just have to be more creative, right? You just have to figure out a way to – you don't have Shedeur Sanders, and I don't think Shedeur got enough credit. And I think it's just more so because people had like a little bit of a personal agenda against him. But Shedeur Sanders had a great command of the offense. He could call his own game if he wanted to. And I don't want to say they don't have that this year, but they're not at that point yet, right? They're still figuring things out. They're still meshing together. And so, yeah, you're sort of gone from like having another coach on the field to like now you're having to basically walk the offense through everything.
And then the Buffs to start this year, they're sitting at 500 going into week 5. A couple of losses. They obviously had that opening loss to Georgia Tech at home, and then ended up falling to Houston as well. But how has it been for this team to face adversity early on, and then you see them bounce back? And you mentioned Caden Salter starting again this week for the second consecutive game. How has that maybe instilled some confidence and kind of, hey, let's get the season struggles out of the way maybe early on as opposed to in the middle of Big 12 play?
Yeah, I mean, the losses were tough, right? The Georgia Tech one, you forced 3 turnovers on the first 3 possessions. You probably expect to win the game, but unfortunately they got 7 points off of those. And the loss to Houston was a little demoralizing as well, honestly. I think Colorado is in this weird state of like still trying to figure everything out. It's like they had a fall camp to figure a lot of these position battles out, and it seems like they're still chipping away. Like quarterback, they had some, I would say, behind the scenes things going on with Caden Salter, right? They felt that they needed to bench him. They felt that like, hey, if like we're not as confident as in you are as we thought we'd be. So that part stings a little bit. And then I think the losses taught them a little bit about themselves, right? I think they know their flaws right now, which one of their flaws is very concerning for BYU specifically because Colorado's run defense has struggled. I do think every team needs to go through adversity, and going through adversity for this Colorado team, I would assume it's brought them closer together, right? Because it's like you've been punched in the mouth now, and you sort of get that feeling of what it's like to be a Colorado team that loses, because even though you don't have Shador, you don't have Travis, you don't have the pomp and circumstance that you did last year, Colorado is still a huge brand, right? People still want to watch you fail, and you get that energy now. And so now it's like, okay, we've got that out of the way, right? As much as it sucks to feel that way, you've got that out of the way. You shouldn't have any like expectations of like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, because it's like now you need to prove that, right? So I think the loss is a bit of a teaching moment on what they could do better. But I also think the hard part about getting a read on this Colorado team is they've had a different attack to every game. I guess you could say like Georgia Tech, it was straight up like we're starting Caden Salter, we're gonna do our thing, whatever. Delaware was like, okay, we're playing 3 quarterbacks. Then Houston, they bench Caden Salter. They go to Ryan Staub because he had the hot hand, and it was like Ryan Staub's not the answer. So then they go back to Caden Salter, and it's like, okay, now he has the hot hand again. So I think the hard part with this Colorado team is they just need to maintain consistency, and I don't know how you do that against a team like BYU who's really good, but BYU, and I've said this, and I talked about this with Jake Hatch, that you guys haven't been tested yet. In all honesty, right? You've played Portland State, who hasn't won, Stanford, who's I used to cover them. That they're still bouncing back from being set back 5 years from not being involved in the transfer portal and NIL. And then East Carolina, I would say, is probably, I would say Stanford's the best team, but East Carolina, record-wise, is the best team. So there's an opportunity here, I would say. So this is something that they've been building towards.
You mentioned the run defense there for the Buffs.
Yeah.
You saw, some of that being exploited, especially against Hayes King, Georgia Tech in the first game. Bear Bachmeier, BYU's quarterback, has 4 rushing touchdowns this season. LJ Martin has shown already through the non-conference, at least, that he's one of the best running backs in the Big 12 and has had a 100-yard game in every game so far this season. How equipped do you think this Buffs team is now, a few games into this season, to be able to handle a run attack like BYU?
I think they have the players to do it. I'm not going to pretend they don't. They have guys. In terms of executing it, I would give, if you were to ask me like scale of 1 to 10 how confident I am in them stopping the run, probably put it at like a 5, right? It's 50-50. Like it seems like there's times where they can, and then there seems like there's times where they get worn out or they're just simply getting pushed off the line. And BYU, I mean, you know it better than anyone, they're very physical, right? They pride themselves on physicality up front. LJ Martin I think he's averaging like 8 yards per carry. Granted, lesser competition, but I mean, he's a dog, right? He's good at what he does. He's physical, he's strong, and I know BYU is going to try to run their offense through him. And so I think if Colorado can, they've had these moments of slowing down the run, right? Keeping teams in, like if they're able to keep BYU in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, I think it forces a young Bear Bachmeier to have to throw the ball. And obviously he hasn't made any mistakes yet. That's cost BYU, but I'd feel more comfortable making the true freshman quarterback throw the ball rather than giving the senior running back as many carries as possible. Now, the problem that I see for Colorado is their best defensive tackle, Anquin Barnes, is out for the first half because of a targeting penalty. They're missing, I think, 3 to 4 other defensive linemen in general, and they're all rotational guys, but depth is key. So that does concern me. I do have a lot of concerns about BYU just sort of shoving it down their throats early and Colorado not being able to sort of bounce back. Because, I mean, we saw it against Houston. I don't know if BYU fans watched this game. They might have. It was a Friday night. But Houston had the ball in the third quarter for, I think it was like 13 minutes. It was just them running the ball, conversion here, conversion there, and like Colorado could not get them off the field. So I imagine BYU watched that film and is probably going to try to emulate that. And so if Colorado finds himself in a similar position, it's going to be tough unless their offense is firing on all cylinders.
Some of the things that I've seen as far as what Buffs fans have said about the offense, even going back to last season in the Alabama Bowl, there's been, some murmurs about Pat Shurmur and some of the play calling.
Yeah.
What have you seen from maybe the offense and the play calling that has given Colorado success through the first 4 games of the season that BYU should look to stop?
Yeah, I think last week was probably their best called game, honestly. I think they just played into Caden Salter's strengths, right? You brought in Caden Salter as a guy who's a dual threat, and I don't necessarily know if they played into those strengths at times throughout the year. But against Wyoming, they were letting him be decisive and quick, and I think that's where he's at his best, where it's like I look at my first read, second read. If no one's there, I'm going to run. If I feel pressure, I'm going to scramble around. I don't know what the disconnect was in the first few weeks, but we saw a confident Caden Salter last week. We saw a Pat Shermer that was getting him, I wouldn't say easy throws, but throws that he was comfortable with. And I don't necessarily know if he was comfortable with the offense through the first couple of weeks, right? I think that's sort of the big adjustment is like you have Shedeur Sanders, who historically is the most accurate quarterback in college football history, right? He completed like, I think it was like 74% of his passes over his career, 70 something percent of his passes is like legitimately, I'm not just making this up. He is the most accurate quarterback in college football history, Shedeur Sanders was. And so going from him to a guy in Caden Salter, who's a little bit more of a dynamic dual threat that's a big play, boom or bust guy, there's some adjustments there. And I think Colorado found those adjustments last week. And it's just finding throws that he's comfortable with, playing through him.
Yeah, I think that going back to that transition, I mean, you do have a guy who was super accurate in Sanders going to Caden Salter, who was also really accurate, and I think that Caden's thrown some balls that he wishes that he would have had, those plays taken back early on this season. But the talent's there, and I think the other thing that maybe BYU fans should be on the lookout for is his ability to use his legs. We saw that previously at Liberty, and I think that was one thing that I didn't see from Shedeur as much as I thought I would see from him. And being able to have a mobile quarterback, I think will definitely help out this Colorado offense. But a couple last questions for you, Kevin, before I set you loose. But I wanted to talk about Coach Prime. He's obviously a polarizing figure. I think that he's maybe misunderstood in the college landscape because, as BYU offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick said earlier this week, Coach Prime is an old school coach. He's played at the highest level in the NFL, but when it's come to coaching, he's also, kind of taken some of that mentality as a player to be able to coach his own team. And then now he's moved on from coaching his sons to now he's just a coach. He doesn't have to worry about being dad on the sidelines at the same time. What can you say about Coach Prime's evolution throughout his first few seasons at Colorado and where he is now?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a misconception is he's kind of like he is old school and he's able to mesh old school and new school very well, right? Like one of the very first things he implemented was nobody gets a jersey number, right? Everyone's earning their jersey number. If you're not a guy that deserves the number one, you're not going to wear the number one, right? So that's like a big thing of his. But he also understands the social media game, and I don't necessarily think it's always him running the socials, but his social media accounts are active, right? And I think that's cool in the eyes of players. But the things that I've seen him evolve over the years at Colorado, he's getting better at game management. I think that's something that he struggled with in the early years. Kyle Whittingham, actually, Utah head coach, he exposed this. I'm sure he did it against BYU at some point too. The substitution rule, where you sub someone off on offense and then Utah trots off 300-pound guys who are running at like 1 mile per hour. Next thing you know, you get to delay a game. So there's learning moments like that. And then I do think he's grown more into building the culture, right? I think at first he was sort of under this impression, or at least gave off this impression that like winning supersedes everything and like winning will basically give you a culture. And that didn't necessarily happen, right? I think you have to sort of build that and then winning coincides with that. And so I think he's done better at that as well.
From your perspective and your listenership, your viewership on your podcast, how are Colorado fans viewing this BYU matchup? Do they like the fact that, BYU and Colorado are back in the same conference like they were forever ago? It's obviously a regional game, neighboring states, but these two teams haven't played very often in the last few decades.
Yeah, I think outside of like the Alamo Bowl, it was like the 1900s the last time they had played, and I think people are excited. I do think Colorado is in this weird spot in the Big 12, and I wouldn't say BYU's in the same spot because you have Utah, but Colorado's like looking for a rival, if you will, right? And I think there's a lot of potential, like TCU, sort of. That's where it all started for Colorado. But this BYU team, BYU program, very popular, very exciting. And like you said, it's very close in proximity. And so I think Colorado fans are excited to play BYU. It's a good test, good litmus test of how good they are because BYU is always good. I think people are a little nervous, though, to be quite frank about this game, right? BYU is a good team. They are just they're clicking right now, and Colorado is still trying to click. So I would say there's a little bit of nerves, but I do think people are excited for the challenge. And Sataki and Coach Prime are very. I talked about this with Jake Hatch. Like they're very close. It seems like they're like best buds. Like it's so I think that's really cool that it's like you could be rivals on the field, but still have a close relationship off of it.
Last question for you, Kevin. You've got BYU fans who are probably making the short trip over to stay nearby in Denver, make up the road for a good game day and a late night kick there in Boulder. I expect at least BYU's tickets to be sold and have a nice showing there in Royal Blue. But what can you say about the game day experience at Folsom Field? You've obviously got Ralphie 7 now coming out on the turf, and maybe what can BYU fans as far as environment expect to see on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great environment. The Colorado late night games always seem to be probably the most hyped up games, right? And I think Colorado's undefeated with Ralphie 7. Just putting it out there, right?
That's a great point. It's a great poll.
She much better than the previous Ralphie. Unfortunately, I found it hilarious that she was indifferent to running, is what they kept saying. So this Ralphie likes to run, so that's exciting. I think that's one of the best traditions in college football, honestly, is having a live mascot run on the field, because it's like so random, and it's one of those things where like I feel like if you tried to do it, like say you guys tried to have a cougar run onto the field now, everyone would be like, "What are you thinking?" Like that'd be such frowned upon. Because Colorado's always done it, it's one of the best things ever. Colorado fans are rowdy. There's a second quarter experience that I think Coach Prime has talked about before, where you just get an overwhelming smell of something that's legal in Colorado and is like spread throughout the United States now. But Coach Prime he always says it's during the second quarter. I forget when it is, but you'll feel that, you'll smell that. That's for sure. And then I think it's just going to be a very loud environment, right? I don't think the Big 12 has a lot of 100,000 people stadiums, but their stadiums pack up, and Colorado is one of them. They fill up, and they're loud and rowdy, and they're very supportive. So that's what I would tell them to expect.
He's Kevin Borba. You can follow him on Twitter, or X now. I keep saying Twitter, but it's X. On X at Kevin_Borba. He's also a writer for Athlon Sports. Make sure to follow him on his podcast as well, YouTube, on all the podcast platforms, I assume, as well there, Kevin, but at Locked On Buffs. Kevin, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
That was my conversation with Kevin Borba of Athlon Sports and the Locked On Buffs podcast. Appreciate Kevin and his time. Make sure to follow him on X at Kevin_Borba. And you can follow the Locked On Buffs podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. But that'll do it for this edition of the podcast. I'm excited to head out to Boulder tomorrow and then get ready for the game on Saturday night. BYU will be playing under the lights at Folsom Field, which I've never been to, so I'm excited to see that environment, see how many BYU fans make the short drive over to Colorado. But BYU hasn't played there since 1981 when it was Jim McMahon and Steve Young playing in that game, so it's been a long, long time since it's been BYU at Colorado. But that'll do it for this edition of the podcast. Be sure to follow me at Kyle Ireland, at Royal Cougs, on wherever you get your social media. If you're an X person, if you're a Facebook person, you can follow us on all of those platforms. And then be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm a Pocket Cast person myself, but you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. You can find us there. But that'll do it for this week, and we will be back again next week as we continue on with Big 12 conference play.